Do we even need the term fine wine anymore? I rarely, if ever, use that term. There's an article that was written last month by my friend Simon Woolf. It's going around on the wine web. It's titled "Fine Wine Isn't Wine, It's Just Commerce." It's very well written. I don't have the highest opinion of wine writing these days. I think Simon's one of the few writers that's doing an outstanding job. If you don't know who he is, he wrote a few books. Amber Revolution, it's all about orange wines. Amber Wines, Foot Trodden, it's all about Portugal. I backed both of these on Kickstarter. Amber Revolution, I actually gave him some recommendations for Croatian wines, which he put in the book. Yeah, he didn't credit me, Simon, so what's up with that? It's a fantastic article. I'll link it in the description box below. It talks about when he was at a panel in Austria a little while ago with several important people in the wine industry, and they were talking about the definition of fine wine or luxury wine. I love how he opens up the article and talks about, in the wine world, we're trying to make it in 21st century that wine is for everybody, but still, there's a lot of gatekeeping. It's a little bit elitist. I think the hidden message is wine is for everybody, but the good stuff is only for the worthy, which Simon highlights in this article. And unfortunately, as open as us wine professionals try to be, I think that statement is right to a certain extent. I know myself, I usually don't have a problem sharing wines with anybody, even really high quality wines. I want to open people's minds up because that's what happened to me. Somebody was generous enough to share some nice wines. However, there are a few wines that once in a while I hold back in the cellar and think, I gotta share these with the right type of people. This issue came to light a few days ago. I went over to my friend's house. They're a couple. They also had another friend over, and they like wine casually. I brought a few wines over to share with them, and one of those was the Penfolds RWT Barossa Shiraz, one of the most iconic Australian Shirazes. They go for well over $120 a bottle. My friend probably likes the wines the most, and he wasn't very enthused about it. And then one of their friends, I could hear her in the background. She was drinking. She's like, what kind of wine is this? Ugh, it's too dry, too bold. I totally get it. When it comes to wine drinkers, it's really segmented in terms of what people are looking for. I didn't take any offense to it, but as the night went on, the people still drank it, right? Because it was alcohol. Towards the end of the bottle, the wine had so much texture, so much flavor, so much complexity. I was like, wow, I think even I underscored it when I reviewed it in a blind tasting months ago. That being said, I didn't feel terrible about sharing it because also I got to drink a few glasses, but maybe that's not the group I would bring a First Growth Bordeaux to. As you go down the article, Simon talks about the panel. They try to define what fine wine is and what luxury wine is. First of all, the definition that they try to give for fine wine is a complex balance with potential to age, though highly drinkable at every stage of its development. It's a capacity to provoke emotions and wonder in the person drinking it while reflecting the expression of truth intended by its maker. It's widely recognized while being environmentally, socially, and financially sustainable. The first couple lines, yes, it does describe what great wine is. I think the last one is just kind of corporate speak. It just seems like, I don't know, I watch a lot of professional sports, and this kind of reminds me of press conferences afterwards. Athletes say, oh, I don't care about my performance. It was all about the team winning. We were aggressive. We came out. We played hard.
The problem is we're down 2-1. That's the problem. We got to figure out how to tie it up.
In the article, it seems like there was a debate, so the panel tries to give a definition of luxury wine, which they say is of the highest quality, coming from a special place on earth, has an element of scarcity, an elevated price, and provides a sense of privilege and pleasure to the owner. If you merge all those definitions together, fine wine is just good wine. It captures our imagination, but it seems like price is the only factor here. In the 17th century, when it came to the fine world of wine, it was really only France, namely Bordeaux, Burgundy, also the Mosel, the Rheingau for Rieslings in Germany, and Tokaj in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Fast forward to today, there are great wines made in every corner of the wine world, from Moldova to Mexico. I've had some great ones in Thailand even, Eastern Europe, which I spend a lot of time, and then of course the classics. Italy has had this humongous renaissance in the last 30, 40 years. Wine that you find in the supermarket, if you took that back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the 17th century, it was probably better than a lot of the wines that they were consuming at the time. If we take a look at both those definitions of fine and luxury wine, high quality, coming from a special place on earth, it provokes emotions, wonder in the person drinking it, reflecting the expression of truth intended by its maker. I feel like that is almost every high quality small producer that us psychos about wine go gaga over. I opened this last night. This is the Krauthaker Kuvlakhe from Croatia. It's an orange wine made of the grape Graševina or Velschriesling. This wine was made by this winemaker that didn't want to drink conventional type wines for himself anymore. He went to Georgia. He really fell in love with macerated orange wines. He wanted to produce wines that didn't need sulfur, made from organically grown grapes in a sustainable manner. I know that now he says that this is the only wine he pretty much drinks. I think in Croatia it's like 22 to 25 US dollars. When I opened it the other night, I was like, man, it just has so much texture, so much complexity. It's a wine that I sit down, it's delicious, and it makes me think, makes me wonder, makes me think about the winemaker, the place where it's from. It has an element of scarcity because he does not make very much of this wine. You can only find it in Croatia, yet the price isn't elevated. So is this fine or is this luxury wine? I'll tell you what, when I was sitting down listening to podcasts the other night, taking a sip of this, I felt pretty damn luxurious, if you ask me. Not just this wine, it's thousands of wines. The reason that hardcore wine geeks like myself get into wine, it's almost like a treasure hunt. You're finding small producers all over the world producing these wines that really evoke imagination. They're really wonderful to drink. Some of these producers are making tiny quantities. You really have to travel, you have to go to the place, you really have to seek out a specialty importer, a specialty shop to get a hold of these wines. Yet in America, it's a huge market. There are 50 states. They're not going to be available in all 50 states. To me, that's the real fun in wine. That's what gets me excited. Of course, I want to taste some of the benchmarks just so you have that Rolodex of information in your head. Unfortunately, some of the top Bordeaux's, the top Burgundies, even some top natural wines, they've just had a meteoric rise in price. You can't afford some of these wines. That's also a debate in my industry. Some young writers coming into this space can't afford to taste these wines unless you know somebody that's super generous. And even then, I taste with a group of collectors that have some of these wines, and they're pretty generous when we do tastings and open them, but there's some wines, they're just so expensive that they won't even open anymore. It's hard for me to begrudge some of these brands, some of these wines that have just reached ridiculous price points. I went through a phase of my life where I was a hardcore Ayn Rand advocate. I still think Atlas Shrugged is one of the most influential novels that I've ever read. I went through a phase where I was a hardcore capitalist. My stance has softened as I've traveled through all different parts of the world. So hey, if they can charge that, I kind of get it, but I think it does take away the spirit, the fun in wine, and price does not always equal quality. If you watch this channel, you know the graph that I use often where I think that in between the 30 and 50 US dollar range, especially in America, you can really drink the greatest wines in the world. That price goes down if you're in Europe, especially in Portugal. When you go over $50, you start to have diminishing returns. You see that on this channel a lot of the times where more inexpensive wines will top the higher priced wines when I do blind tastings. Simon shares a personal story about a homemade fine wine in this. You'll have to read the article. I have a similar story. One of the most impactful wines in my life was a liter of Sangiovese that I drank the first time I backpacked through Europe in graduate school. It was in the town of Lucca. I remember putting my nose in that carafe and just smelling it literally for 5 minutes. My friends that were backpacking with me looked at me like I was crazy. At that time, I was drinking only supermarket wines. I didn't know that wine could taste like that. When I tasted it, it was so flavorful, so intense. It really evoked imagination. It made me think of where it came from. It's almost like this definition of fine wine that they give it, although it probably, I don't know, couldn't age very well. It definitely wasn't very expensive because we were broke graduate students. To me on this channel, what I'm trying to show is there are so many good wines made around the world. You don't have to find the specific wine you see in a magazine or even in this video. You have to go out there and explore. To me, the ultimate purpose of good wine, fine wine, whatever you want to call it, a bottle keeps the people that you love at the table a little bit longer. Conversations flow a little bit differently as opposed to conversations if you're drinking beer, if you're drinking spirits. I think when you drink wine, maybe it's that level of sophistication, maybe it is that placebo effect, but I feel like conversations become more vulnerable. You talk about more real things. Of course, all tastes are different. And with the quality of wines improving all over the place, there's sure to be a bottle that a lot of people at the table enjoy. So to me, the definition of fine wine is almost obsolete. I don't think the term luxury wine is aptly named. Maybe we should just call it trophy wine or status symbol. What do you think? I'd love to hear your opinion. Drop it in the comments below.